Good morning, everyone. I hope you are doing well, staying safe and healthy through this pandemic. Hopefully, everybody's getting ready to enjoy a nice Thanksgiving with their family. So, on page 2, I want to just remind everybody how we're kind of attacking the Gospel of Matthew. Last week, and actually the last couple of weeks, we've been going through the Sermon on the Mount and specifically the Beatitudes, which was Jesus's clarification of a lot of the things in the Old Testament. Remember, Matthew was a Jew, and he was really writing this to convince other Jews that Jesus was the true Messiah. So there was a lot of interaction with the Old Testament that was very familiar to the people of the time. Now, this section is chapters 8 through 10 of Matthew. It's really worth reading. They're not that long. It's really interesting because this is sort of after that Sermon on the Mount. And remember, there's no internet at this time. There's no TV. There's no radio. They didn't even really make books at the time, so it's all word of mouth. So while he gave this famous sermon, he then comes down from the mountain and interacts with the people, and that's what we're going to go through. That's really what Matthew went through in chapters 8, 9, and 10. And in particular, chapter 10 is where Jesus introduces the 12 disciples and how they're supposed to go out and spread the word. So that's what we're going to focus on in this week's lesson. Before we get into chapters 8, 9, and 10, though, I think it's important to do a quick refresher on the Beatitudes. And the reason why this is so important is really this is the story of the Gospels, right? These are I don't want to say they're the rules, but they're the messages Jesus is trying to get to the people, that if you are merciful, if you are humble, if you are willing to accept and believe and be the best kind of person you can be, those are the people that inherit this amazing kingdom of heaven. And that's really the goal. That's all the things we go through, right? All the sacraments that the mysteries that we go through, communion, confession, baptism, everything you've learned about and everything you hear about in church every Sunday, it's kind of synthesized nicely in this section of Matthew. So if you can understand that and follow this, this kingdom of heaven is yours. And that's what Jesus was talking about on the Sermon on the Mount, but that's also what he's trying to get across to people when he comes down from that and mingles among people and heals them and saves them. It's understanding this is my message. And that was his way of getting it across to people so they would believe him and understand what he's telling them in this sermon, that this is the truth and this is the path for you to attain this eternal life. Now, we talked about how there wasn't an easy way to disseminate this information that he provided on the Sermon on the Mount to people in those days, right? It all had to be word of mouth. And so chapters 8 and 9 in particular are like literally right after the Sermon on the Mount, that he comes down from the mountain and immediately starts saving and healing people. So there are, lepers, and there are, people with, fevers, people with demonic possession. And so Matthew goes through and kind of writes about all of these different unique situations of Jesus saving and healing people. And the whole time, sort of the underlying theme that Jesus is relating here is, yes, I'm powerful, I am the true Son of God, but you need to follow me. You need to follow me and the lessons that I'm teaching you. And that's sort of the healing and the saving is great, obviously, but it's that underlying message that, you are, I am here, I am the Son of God, but I have this message that you need to hear, need to listen to, need to sort of take in and follow, because that's the true way. And so there's a lot of there's a number of these. I think there's 9 in total of him doing these miracles, but it's really less about that single act and more about the entirety of following what he's teaching people. Now, as Jesus is doing this, you can imagine the people that are currently in power are not happy about this, right? That unless they're believers, they're seeing this as somebody who is coming to sort of usurp their power. And Jesus goes through and is doing all this healing and saving, and the word kind of starts to get around, and that's Jesus's point, right? That we're interacting with people on the ground, and it's spreading word of mouth, and he's getting larger and larger groups of people following. But as part of that, you're also getting people who are angry about this, that think this is blasphemous and not, the true Son of God. And in particular, there's a section where he meets with sinners and with Matthew, who's a tax collector. And remember, tax collectors aren't looked upon as the greatest people. And the religious leaders are saying, why are you meeting with sinners? Why are you meeting with these people who are bad? And I kind of pasted this in. I think it's chapter 9, verses 12 through 14. It's really, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick, right? So the people that are already, believers, I don't need to convince them. I don't need to talk to them. I need to educate and teach the people who aren't believers now. And it's a pretty powerful message, right? That, calls out, again, we're not preaching to the believers, we're preaching to the people that don't believe. And the other piece that's interesting is Matthew and Jesus, Matthew's writing it, but Jesus is doing it, is it lays the groundwork for what's coming, where he knows there's people that either don't believe or don't want to believe, that are going to reject his teachings. He knows he's going to die, eventually be killed for this. And he's laying that groundwork of there's going to be resistance. And we get into that, and Matthew gets into it in chapter 10, which we'll talk about on the next page. So chapter 10 is Jesus introducing who all the disciples are and instructing them on how to go out and spread this word, right? So Jesus can only do so much as one person, living on the ground. He needs assistance from his followers to continue to spread the word. And obviously we're here 2,000 years later talking about this, so they were successful in doing this spread. But he gives them instructions, go into different towns, talk about, what you've seen, who I am, what my message is. But the key part for me was he lets them know ahead of time, there are people who are not going to like you and that are going to reject what you're saying. And he tells them specifically how to handle this rejection. And I think it's an important message, not only for the disciples at the time, but for us today, that there is going to be rejection, and how do you handle that in your life with your religion? And what's on the right here is you'll copy and pasted from Matthew chapter 10 and these verses that, they knew ahead of time this was going to happen, that there was going to be, people who were going to be very angry with them and violent, and there was a lot of trouble that was going to come from this, but they went ahead anyway because they believed. And what's interesting, if you kind of look through the history, I think all but one of the disciples ended up being, killed for their beliefs and martyred, right? The one that maybe didn't was John, and even he was, tortured and exiled to a Greek island. So, it was a massive risk for them that they took, a risk of, potentially their life, but their belief and their faith was so strong that they went through. And again, we're talking about this today, 2,000 years later. So they were ultimately very successful in that. So I'm going to leave you with that for this week. Next week, we're going to focus on the next 4 chapters of Matthew. And I hope you have a enjoyable Thanksgiving. And I hope you are around next Sunday so we can review this and delve further into Matthew. Thank you.